صباح الخير. Actually, I thought I can practice my Arabic here, but now I see there are so many people also here who are not from that country and probably not speaking Arabic. Well, I know like 20 words or maybe 40, I don't know. Okay, so I wouldn't be able to deliver the talk in Arabic. Yeah, so, well, thanks to Boris to raising the bar so high. So I heard him say every once in a while, well, Jutta will talk about this. And I was thinking, oh, I'm not so sure if I have the time for that, but we'll see. Okay, first of all, of course, thanks to all the sponsors. I know they make it possible to have a conference like this. And a little bit background from myself. And if you remember how Boris started, actually, he said like in 2010, it started with scaling Agile. Well, I was a little bit ahead of my time. So I published the first book on scaling, which is the Agile software development in the large, and I published that in 2004 already, and nobody really worried about scaling at the time. And so I kind of, published more books while I was working with different companies and saying that this is not what I'm talking about today. Today, I want to talk about my latest book, which is this one. And, well, my co-author and I, you could say, we tried to put all the buzzwords together in one title. And we almost managed, but only almost, because we forgot a few things. And the few things we forgot to put on the title are, for example, this one. And Boris kind of closed this way, saying the biggest problem we are having is that things are getting more and more complex, and that's why the old ways of working, leadership, and all kinds of things, also structure, bureaucracy, and all of that, they are not working anymore because our world has become too complex. And now adding to that, and maybe this is part of the complexity, is the digitalization. Because it means that every company is now becoming a software company, although it doesn't know it yet. I talked to one of the, well, again, automotive, I'm from Germany as well, BMW. And like 5 years ago, and their manager told me, well, actually, they regard themselves as a software company right now and not like an automobile company anymore. Because the key differentiator is software and not the car anymore. And I bet if I would have talked to somebody else in BMW, they would tell me something else. So it's not that everyone has that, is convinced about that, but a lot are. And so this is a struggle that companies are facing, and the key answer, well, maybe I'm biased, but the key answer in my opinion is Agile. So companies need to become Agile, but as Boris said already, it's not so much Agile in terms of processes. That is important still, but a company is so much more than processes. And the two other key things, in my opinion, are strategy and structure. And Agile in itself, looking at Scrum or so, there are not a lot of answers what Agile means in terms of strategy or structure. And so, well, we thought we look somewhere else because there are others who have provided answers already and we know it's working. So this was kind of our approach. So what we found were those different streams, and at the end it came together as a nice acronym which came after the fact that we found that. So we looked at beyond budgeting, which provides an answer mainly for the strategical part. I will look into that and provide a few hints what it is just in the next few slides. Then we have Sociocracy, looking more at the structural side of the company. We have open space, and Boris luckily talked quite a bit about what open space does based on that invitation, and it's really more the cultural aspect, the people aspect of the company. And of course there's Agile, and I assume you all know what Agile is about. So this all comes together to what we call Bossa Nova, and maybe just a little bit about that. So we played around with the acronym, and this came out, and then we found, I feel like I'm kind of an expert now in Bossa Nova. It's really a really good fit, because Bossa Nova, as it is meant originally, it is a fusion of samba and cool jazz. And in that way, the way we are using it, it's a fusion of these different streams, right? So it's not a music thing, unfortunately, but still, it is a fusion as well. And then also, Bossa Nova is a specific dance, and we think just like in a dance where you are influenced by the music that's played and by the people on the dance floor and your dance partner, but you also influence the music and the people on the dance floor, the way you are acting there. So, and this is also kind of well, if you will, an inspect and adapt that's happening. And that's true for that too. And lastly, Bossa Nova means new trend, new wave, and of course we hope that this is what we provide here. But all based on proven principles. Now let's look into those. So first of all, beyond budgeting. Beyond budgeting suffers from the same problem than we have in many ways in the Agile world. So just give you a few examples. Extreme programming, the way it was named or is named, people always said, well, it's too extreme and too much programming in it, and that's why it's not working out. And then if we look into Scrum, well, there's a sprint, which sounds like people are out of breath after a sprint, which is also not really good. And then we have the Scrum Masters, where people ask, and where are the slaves? And you know, all of these things. So naming is really hard. And beyond budgeting is suffering from the naming too. So it is about budgeting, but not only about budgeting. It's way more about management, and that's why the real definition of beyond budgeting is what I have here on the slide, which is a management model that's toward more being empowered and adaptive. And you could also say maybe that's obvious because money rules the world, and the way you deal with your budget really sets the state in how you manage your company, right? So, because, well, if you start with, you have an annual fixed budget, what's your leeway in that VUCA world, in this complex world? Because you have fixed everything a year in advance. So there isn't really much you can do about it. It's all static already and has been decided long before. So this also means it drives the way you are managing the company. And so what beyond budgeting actually says is you have to overcome that, and overcoming that in different ways. And I give you a few examples which are kind of, I think, at the core of beyond budgeting. First of all, look at what a budget really does. So there are three purposes. That's the understanding what a budget does for you. So the first purpose is, well, we want to know where we are heading. What do we want to achieve? So this is our target, actually. The next thing that we want to do with a budget is we kind of think of what will happen. So that's what we call the forecast. So the one is our ambition, and the other thing is what kind of the reality, what we think will happen. And then the third answer we give with a budget is where do we want to invest the money in? So that's resource allocation. And just like kind of one disclaimer, I know a lot of people in the Agile world, whenever they see resource, they say, oh, they are people, they are not resources, right? Here in Beyond Budgeting, we really talk about the financial side. And yes, the money can also be invested into people, but it just means money, first of all. So that's why I stick with the term resource here. So the thing is, these three things, where do we want to head, what do we think will happen, and where do we invest the money in, all these things are put together into one, which is the budget. And so beyond budgeting suggests maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe we should separate those out and treat them separately. And once you come to that understanding that the budget really has these three different purposes, you are also much more, well, maybe agile, flexible, adaptive, more responsive to change and all of that. And just look at a target. If you want to treat a target more in a responsive way, what you need to do is not treating the target as or setting a target as an absolute one, because that's not working in a complex VUCA world anymore, but taking the target as a relative one. And let's give an example. Assume I'm a salesperson, and my target has been set in a classic way. I have to sell 100 of our product units over the year. And if I do so, I get my bonus. So that's an absolute target, 100 units, right? Now, assume I manage that and I'm selling 100 units over the year. Say, yes, I get my bonus, that's cool. Yet, from a company's point of view, what's actually happening if our competitor has sold 200 units? Actually, I didn't really do well. But the thing is, the world is complex and it's changing so fast, we don't know a year in advance what's actually a good target. Now, also use the same example. What about if our competitor has sold only 20 units over the year and I sold 100? Oh my God, that makes a whole world. So here you can see a relative target is what is the only thing that's really telling us something in these days. Absolute targets, they are kind of outdated the next day. Now looking at forecasts, if we think about, okay, what will happen, again, it might be outdated perhaps the next day, but definitely like a month from now. So what we need is a rolling forecast or event-driven forecast. So whenever something is changing, we need to look at the forecast again and then adjust accordingly where do we want to put our money in. So dynamic resource allocation and not a year in advance. And having that is, I would say, especially from a strategic point of view, a key thing for becoming agile as a company. As long as you fix your budget a year in advance, it's just almost impossible to get there. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is open space. And again, I'm really, really glad that Boris said already so much about open space. So open space, the way we are looking at it on the company level are actually in two ways. So one way is a little bit what you heard from Boris. So just use an open space facilitation technique, for example, to kicking off your new product development or your project. So you bring all the people together and they figure out what do we need to decide upon, how do we want to structure ourselves, what kind of architecture we need, and maybe what kind of suppliers do we need, and so you invite people to sort this out. So this is one way, which is really, really great, and I have really had huge success doing that because, as Boris explained, people have more buy-in because they volunteered and they came up with the stuff themselves. So that's the one big thing. The other thing, what we call organizational open space, is running your whole company like that, meaning you invite people or you have a standing invitation in your company that people can suggest new products, new features at any time. And as in open space, if there are enough people who say, like, this is a cool idea, I really want to make that happen, So they are coming together and making that happen, so it's a go. So it's not setting up a design thinking session or think tank or whatever creative idea boxes, but having this open invitation spoken out all the time is the key driver for innovation. And I'm really glad that when I heard that today in the afternoon we have a session on Agile and innovation, because that's a really, really important thing here. So having this invitation spoken out is actually something some companies do for quite some time. For example, Gore-Tex, so W.L. Gore, so the Gore-Tex company. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, because it's always warm here. We need this in the place I grew up, because it's raining all the time and we need to have stuff that's protecting us from rain and all of that. So they run their company this way. Everyone can come up with a new feature, a new product, and if there are enough people who want to make that happen, it's a go. So no difficult procedure here. Now looking at the next one, which is Sociocracy, and Sociocracy looks at the structure side of a company, and it's mainly based on equivalence. And equivalence here means that all the decisions are made based on consent. And I try to make that as quick as possible, because I know I don't have a lot of time here, is that consent, not consensus, means I can live with that decision. I can accept it. So that's a key differentiation to consensus, where we ask, well, I'm in favor for that decision. I like it. I think that's the best decision ever. So if you want to make a decision with a group of people, stop asking if people like that decision, because that's not the question. The question is if everyone can tolerate that decision and can live with that. And a really helpful thing is also if you then say, maybe can you live with that decision for the next 3 months, or whatever your time frame is, because then it's also much easier to go along and make that decision. And I'm saying that because the way we often make decisions in companies is way too slow. It's too slow if we make the decisions up in the hierarchy until everything is trickled down. And if people have no buy-in in the decision, it takes even longer till it's implemented. So you need to find a different way how to come quickly to decisions to move forward, right? So decision making is one thing. Another thing is, and also Boris pointed to that, is the hierarchies. So hierarchies, as we know them, are typically done top down. That's what I kind of try to show with the arrows here in this picture. And as a good Agile person, what you probably think, if you look at this way, is, where is the feedback loop in the structure? It goes top down. There is no feedback. And there is another thing, which is, especially for the managers in between, we often call them the managers in a sandwich position, because their responsibility is to ensure that whatever has been decided on the top will be transferred to the bottom and also implemented. But they are also expected to represent their units, their teams, their departments, whatever they are standing for. So they're really kind of in this sandwich position here. Now, Sociocracy says, maybe that's not a good idea to have this, but better is to separate it out. And separating it out by what's called double linking. So from every level in the hierarchy, you have an elected representative representing the same thing bottom to top. So you have two people, one top to bottom, the other one bottom to top, but because they are all making their decisions based on consent, they all have the same say. And again, I really want to reemphasize what Boris said. It's not about no managers. We need managers. Somebody has to do that work. But having appointed managers top to bottom only is not enough, because it doesn't provide us enough flexibility, and it doesn't, and we are too slow for a lot of things. So we need that double link, that connection. Okay, going on, and the last one from the Bossa Nova is Agile, and I would hope I don't need to say a lot about that. So at the key, it is inspecting and adapting, and Agile provides mainly everything around processes. Now the question is, why these four? There are so many other things out there, and there is so much that we can also use. Our approach was, first of all, we looked at stuff that's complementary to each other. So we didn't want to have something that's repeating the other thing. The other thing is that we thought about taking more a Goldilocks approach, not too specific, not too generic. So for example, what people talk about right now a lot is like the Spotify model. However, there's no such thing as a Spotify model. It's just a specific implementation, and what they are doing at Spotify is changing at least every week. So it's always just a snapshot. And copying it doesn't get you anywhere, so what you need is more, well, if you copy something, then it's being adaptive and ready to change everything whenever it's needed. And for maybe the things on your upper right, we also looked at more the original things. So for example, Holacracy is a derivative from Sociocracy, and that's why we use Sociocracy, because that's the original thing, and it's also, let's say, more concise. So it has like only 4 principles, where Holacracy comes with a ton of stuff, and so we just felt it's too complicated. Okay, so there's a lot out there, and probably you realize that already. It's not a complete list. It was once maybe a complete list, or we thought it's a complete list or picture, but probably it never was. And the thing is, because things are uncovered all the time, but it gives you an idea of what's out there. Okay, so what does this mean now? How do people using it? And I want to give you a few examples here. So this is an example from one of the companies I have been working with, and it's looking at applying open space in a company. And what we did there, it's so we were building an ERP system, and not the big company in Germany. It's a Swiss company actually here, but still we had, I don't know, like 100 people or so. And we decided we want to organize the teams in a different way. And well, the one thing was the cross-functionality, and also having more the customer focus and all of that. And so what we did was saying, okay, what are the different aspects of the product here, and what kind of teams do we need, and what kind of skills are we looking for here? And then we had this out, in this case really on flip charts and in the town hall, and saying like, people, you can just sign up where you would like to work with. So again, what Boris said, kind of this open space thing, where people really want to, what they want to do. The thing is also how he said, we feared at first that maybe something will be left open because nobody likes that part of the system, but it didn't happen. So we just had it long enough. So at first it was like that. There was a run for some aspects of the product, but then people are reasonable enough that they figure, well, maybe somebody has to deal with this and that. And maybe if we are all on that team, that doesn't help, because we will not move forward as a whole. So that's a good idea, to have self-selecting teams at first. Your next step could be that you are running it and say, okay, what kind of product aspects do we need? And then the next step is, what products are you really suggesting, and what kind of features? So that's kind of how you bring in open space. Then another example I want to bring is, well, who has seen something like that? And who likes it? Is there anyone who likes that? Everyone everyone hates that, right? The interesting thing with all the travel expenses and how they are treated is that the procedures are set up so because in a company we often think we cannot trust the people to spend the money wisely when they're traveling. However, we trust everyone to run projects which are worth $1 million or whatever, which is kind of weird. So we think, well, you can't really book a hotel for yourself, but you can run a project worth $1 million. Really a little bit weird. Anyway, so this is kind of what's existing. However, there are other possibilities how you run it, and there's like one example from a German company called Agile. They say, like, what we have given up on all the procedures, we have put it down to like 3 principles. And those 3 principles are, first of all, whatever you do when you're traveling, it has to be legal. Okay, that's good, I think. Yeah. Then the next thing they are saying is the way you're spending the money has to be sensible. But they are not saying what they mean with that. It's just that way. Then the third thing is we expect you to take care for yourself, which my translation would be, well, I probably wouldn't like to have so many connections when I travel somewhere because it's just, I think this is a hassle. However, what the manager told me, the interesting thing is there are a few people, like a third of the people is traveling always first class, so this is trains because they are mainly in Germany, and the others are traveling second class on the train. And the interesting thing is that it's not the managers traveling first class, it's actually more the consultants doing that, and he also said everyone thinks that this is fine because they're traveling the most. The others don't travel that frequent. So just making that information public is good enough for them, so they don't have any other procedures here for that. And now I want to look into what are the underlying values of these kinds of approaches. And one of the things we have seen already also from Boris, where he said, well, it's about the information, that you are providing the information to the people who really need it, and they have a chance to get it. That's what we call transparency. Then he also spoke a lot about self-organization. Then probably another thing that's kind of obvious, that we should focus on the customer. And the fourth thing, which is maybe the most important thing, is that the core value is continuous learning. And for all those 4 values, well, first of all, maybe it's not a surprise for you and you have seen something like this before, they are derived from the Agile Manifesto. And we also have a definition for those values, and I just give you a little bit of time to read through them. I think you can read, so I don't need to read it out. Maybe the interesting thing for the transparency is really the 2 directions. And it is not making everything transparent, because that's not the most important thing. The important thing is to provide the information to those people who really need it in order to make good decisions, for example. So these were the underlying values of this kind of behavior that I showed with the 2 examples. There's also an underlying approach, and the underlying approach is around, we call it probing. You could say maybe it's experimentation. I like probes better. So it's looking at what's your context you are in, what kind of change is needed because the world around you has changed because of the VUCA world. Then you might want to look at what kind of probes apply to your situations. And in our book, we have like 23 probes, and also on our website, we keep publishing probes from companies doing that, so it's also available there. And then you try an experiment and see how has your situation changed. And ideally, you also do it in a scientific way, meaning you publish about your probes. Wherever you do that, of course, we would welcome it if it would be like on our website or on LinkedIn or something so that other people can see it, but it's also good enough if you publish it within your company so other units can learn from your experiences. That's already helpful. So if we now and I know I have to speed up. If we now look at what does this mean, how can this look like, I want to look into one of the probes, and which is the one about travel expenses. So this is how we set up the probes. So it has a background description like I asked you. So most of the people are kind of frustrated about how the procedures around travel expenses are treated. So that's kind of what we think is the fact. Then we come up with a hypothesis that maybe trusting people is cheaper than coming up with all those procedures and controlling this afterwards and all of that. Then you can run a few experiments, but before you do that, you should first measure if this is really true, your background. So are people really frustrated? I kind of did it quickly and asked, well, who likes it? And nobody said, yes, I like the way the travel expenses are done, right? Then you do an experiment for a given time frame. We suggest here 3 months with a few units, and then you measure again, and if it's good, you roll it out. So this is kind of a typical setup for a probe. A background, a hypothesis, one or several experiments. And one experiment could be just copy what IT Agile did and worked for them. Another example actually is from BOSSA. What they are doing is they have only one rule. Remember, IT Agile had 3, and BOSSA has only 1. And the one rule is, whatever you spend the money on, make it transparent in the intranet. And this is how they treat everything, no matter if you travel or if you need to buy a new laptop or anything. So the only thing is you say, where did you spend it on, what did you spend it on, and how much? And then it's kind of the peer control. If I spend too much, people will ask me, and if I have a good explanation, it's all fine. Okay, so these are the probes, and maybe I really want to skip very quickly over that. We have, as I said, a lot of probes in our book, and there's one thing which I find really important. It also came before, that making mistakes is the way we are learning. And often you hear people talk about fail fast because of that. Actually, I don't really like that term. I use it myself a lot, but I think what we really need to do is learn fast. Failing fast is not the thing that gets us anywhere, but the learning does. And so the way we set up the probes is actually a way of kind of learning from those experiments and then adjusting to our new learnings. I want to bring one last example here. It's also a probe, but it's from a company, so this is not in our book. This is what we learned later on. So this is from a bank. And the picture is not original. I found it on the internet. So it's not, it was just how I assumed the room for the board of directors looks like. Kind of looks like a board of directors room, I think. However, what that bank did was they decided we try to move the table out of the room for the board of directors meetings, and they did. So they have now just, I've never went there, so I don't know, but they either sit in their chairs or they stand, I don't know, but there's no table in between. And what they said, what it did, was it changed the way they are communicating. The conversations are way more open and more inviting, and they are listening better than they did before. And what's also interesting, they also said, like, it's also the communication from the board of directors to the rest of the bank improved a lot because of that. It also turned into be a more open conversation. And now I'm not saying that because I'm assuming all of you are sitting in the board of directors, on a board of directors. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. I brought this example more that sometimes it's something that's kind of a simple thing. Moving out a table is not like a big investment or anything, but still it can make a huge, huge difference. And if it's not working, you put it back in. There's nothing lost, right? So it's more an example of how a probe with the experiments can be set up, and it doesn't have to be expensive, and just maybe it sparks any ideas what you can try in your company. And which also brings me to, I'm almost at the end, to this is where we kind of really see how the probing works. You might think, well, isn't that the same as I showed before? Let's go back. So this is how it was before. And if you look to your right-hand side, then you see the difference. Here it says design probes. So it's more about you coming up with your own ideas, what fits into your context. And actually, if you will, then this is more the Spotify model than anything else. Because it's trying something, looking if it's working, and if it's working, then it's good. But maybe there comes a time where it's not working anymore, and so you need to try something else and change it again, which is actually, I think, the key thing to become agile as a company. And so in the essence, really the challenges right now, they require companies to be agile, and it's not the IT aspect, it's really the whole company to become agile, and more in the literal sense, being responsive, flexible, adaptive, and all of that. So it's not about applying Scrum at the board level or anything like that, right? It's really the general agile thing, which is bossa nova, and which means like never stop trying, learning, and changing. So thank you very much, and I'm here for the rest of the day, and I think we don't have time for questions right now, but I'm around for questions. Thank you. 5 minutes? Okay, I just heard from Faris that we can take 5 minutes for questions. So are there any questions right now? I don't want to use up all your break. Questions? Yes, about budgeting. The microphone is coming.
You said, first, thanks for your presentation. You said that budgeting should be flexible. I mean, still in companies, corporations, you need to have, for the rules of financing and everything, and also external reporting, you need to have a budget. You need to document that. What you're saying is not that you should not have a fixed budget in a way, but you should allocate it more flexible. Is that correct?
Yes, right. And actually there are, meanwhile, whatever is a lot, right? There are several companies doing beyond budgeting for quite some years. Actually, it's not something new. Beyond budgeting has been uncovered, I have to say, because it's not an invention or anything, in the 70s. So it's not a new thing, but it's only now kind of taking off, and I believe because of the VUCA world and because of Agile as well, because it plays together so well. And there are companies who are also public, and so they need to report, but still, they don't fix the budget. Because what you probably all have seen, so for example, I'm applying for money for the project I want to run, and so I'm lucky and I get the money, but then I figure, well, the market has changed and it's not so important anymore. What do? I've never seen anybody giving the money back. I've never seen it. So what people do is they spend it, and well, on the one hand, it's also good for people like me because I'm a consultant, because so a trainer and so on, and so they have the money to go for training classes and so on. The thing is, because if they would give it back, the next time, let's assume that was me, the next time I ask for the money, I won't get it, because people say, well, we know Jutta is always asking for too much. And then if it's the other way around, if I ask for the money and the market has changed and we need way more, the money is all gone. I can't get more. So both ways are not good for the company. From the company's perspective, it's a kind of a perceived control and a better way to work with the money in a right way, but it's actually not. And that's the thing that's maybe hard to really internalize. It's maybe not so hard to understand because everyone has seen that and everyone says yes, yes, yes. But really to let go and say, well, we need to be more flexible makes a big difference. Yeah. I guess I feel like you need coffee.
Yeah, no.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.